Resourceful Designer, episode 129. 9 situations when you should say no to your clients.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He had a recurring childhood dream that he was a vampire. Mark DeCote.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in, plugging me into your ears. I always appreciate it when you take a little bit of time out of your day to listen to me as we discuss running our graphic design business. Now, in this episode of the podcast, I'm going to share a resource that can make your business seem bigger than it actually is, as well as offer you some peace of mind in some situations. Then I'm going to get on to the main topic where I'll share 9 situations where you should say no to your clients. And I will end the episode with a great question from Amanda about fonts and what to do when a client uses a font that you don't have. Now, maybe this is your first time tuning in to Resourceful Designer. Perhaps you discovered the app in one of the app stores and decided to check this thing out, or maybe you were looking through Spotify and came across the podcast. And if you're listening because a fellow graphic designer recommended the show to you, please make sure to thank them for me. Regardless of how you found the show, you may be wondering, who is this guy? And why should I be listening to him? Well, as the intro said, my name is Mark DeCote. I'm a Canadian graphic designer. I've been in the graphic design space for 29 years now, and I've been running my own successful home-based graphic design business since 2005. My formal training, what I went to school for, is in print design, but I have been designing websites since 1996. I actually looked that up earlier today. I can't believe it's been that long, but I designed my very first website in 1996. Now I'm going to date myself a little bit here because that first website was designed using Adobe PageMill version 1.0. Yep, the very first one. Now, of course, nowadays, the bulk of my work is web-related, focusing mostly on WordPress sites. I love using the Divi theme by Elegant Themes. And if you want to check out Divi, I'll just put a little plug here. If you visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Divi, you can get 10% off if you're signing up for the first time. Or if you're upgrading from a regular account to maybe a lifetime account. I have a lifetime account. It's well worth it. So if you're interested in Divi or anything by Elegant Themes, that is my affiliate link, resourcefuldesigner.com/Divi. So as I said, the bulk of my work now is web design, although I am always ready to delve back into the world of print design should any of my clients need something. And from time to time, they do. So I love doing logos and brochures and posters and trade show booths and all that stuff as well as web design. But over the years, the bulk of my work has been web related. But that's enough about me. Hopefully you're curious enough now to continue listening to the show. And if you like what you heard by the time you're done, be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. It's absolutely free. And now, as I mentioned earlier, I like to start every episode off with a resource of the week. And this week's resource is a dedicated mailbox for your business. Now, I'm not talking email. I'm talking about a physical mailbox. And this is especially important if you're running a home-based business. Now, let me tell you why. First of all, since the day I started my business in 2005, one of the first things I did after registering the business and all that hoopla stuff that you have to go through, one of the first things I did was get a mailbox at a local UPS store. In fact, when I first got it, it wasn't a UPS store. It was actually a store called Mailboxes, etc. And then UPS bought them out. So it's a mailbox at the UPS store. And all my business dealings go through that mailbox. Now, there's several reasons why I do this. For one, it's protection for your family and for your home as well. When I first started my business, I had young kids at home. My kids are now grown up. But at the time, they were pretty young, and I didn't want people just showing up or stopping by the house for no reason, especially if I wasn't home. So a great way to deter that was on all my correspondence, on my letterhead, on my business cards, everywhere that I have my address, I had the mailbox for the UPS store as my address. And I put down that it's my mailing address. I didn't say it's my physical address, my address. Everywhere I put mailing address, and then I would put the address. And that was just another way to give me some peace of mind that clients, not that, I was expecting anything wrong, but you never know what could happen. And it was just better if clients didn't know where I lived. Now, in my situation, I happen to live just outside the city of Cornwall, Ontario. I live in a town called Long Sault, which is a very small town. And basically nobody would know where this is. If I say I live in Long Sault, Ontario, even people in Ontario don't know where that is. But if I say Cornwall, Ontario, it's not as popular as, say, Montreal, Quebec, or Toronto, Ontario. But Cornwall is a city of about 50,000 people, and it's a little bit more well known. So my mailbox is actually in the city of Cornwall. So as far as people are concerned for my business is a Cornwall-based business. So that's another thing I like about it. Now, what's great about having a mailbox at something like the UPS store or one of these other dedicated places is for just deliveries. Whenever, like, I do some print brokering, and if I order something online, if I order brochures or business cards or that, I don't have to worry about being home or not being home when they arrive. I don't have to worry about getting a little thing in the mail saying, go pick up your package here, or the worst case, them leaving it on the doorstep and maybe it raining and getting rained on. I don't have to worry about that. Everything goes to the UPS store and it is held there for me. I can go pick it up whenever I happen to be around there. I've got a key. I can access the place 24 hours a day, although not for packages. That's just for envelopes. The actual mailbox is accessible 24 hours a day. So it's great. I can order stuff and never have to worry whether I'm going to be here or not. The same for drop-offs. Sometimes the clients will want to give me something on a flash drive, or used to be on CDs or DVDs, which very few. I still have a DVD drive here for my computer, but they rarely give me anything like that these days. It's usually on flash drives or something. And I can just tell them, go stop by the UPS store, and one of the nice ladies that works there, just say, here, can you put this in Mark's mailbox? And I give them the mailbox number, and they'll put it in. So the next time I go by, I open my mailbox, and there's the flash drive for me. So drop-offs and that sort of stuff are great. Now, the other thing is it does make, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, it makes your business seem, I don't know, more legitimate or bigger, because in my case, and the UPS store, and I think all UPS stores do this, it's not a PO box. It's actually a suite number. So my address is the street address, suite, and my suite number. So to a lot of people, that makes it sound like, wow, like, this is a legitimate business. There's their address and there's their suite number. Now, they don't know that that's just a mailbox, but whenever I'm dealing with somebody, I'm dealing with a supplier, that it makes it sound a lot more legitimate when I give them my address than just giving them my residential home address. So it is a way to make your business sound bigger. And if you are going to work with partners, or if you have contractors working with you, it's a great way to just keep everything local, keep everything centralized so that all correspondence comes through that physical mailbox. So anyways, that was a long description of what I thought was a good resource to share with you. And that is just having a dedicated mailbox for your business that is not your home. As I said, the number one thing for me was just the protection of home and family. I know I have a lot of women that listen to this show, and you ladies out there, you might be married, you might be single, maybe you're a single mom. Do you really want clients to know where you live and can stop by at any time? I mean, I don't want to say that there are some creepy clients out there, but there are some creepy clients out there. And especially if they find out they're working with, a single woman, and you never know what can happen. So protect yourself if you can. It doesn't cost too much. I think I'm paying just over $200. I don't have one of the small boxes. I've got a medium size. I think I'm paying $200 a year for it or something like that. And I've been doing that since I started my business in 2005, and it's been well worth it. So that's this week's Resource of the Week, a dedicated mailbox for your business. And now the main topic, 9 situations where you should say no to your clients. Now, I'm trying to remember exactly how that old joke went. It was something like, business would be so much easier if I didn't have to deal with clients. And yeah, it's kind of funny to think of it that way, but it's obviously unrealistic. Without clients, we wouldn't have a business. So thank you, raise a drink to all the design clients out there that keep us designers, people like you, people like me, in business. We love you, clients. We want more of you. Keep coming. So yes, clients are great. However, some clients can be difficult to work with at times. And others, let's just say they can be a real pain in the assumption that we'll bend over backwards to work with them. See what I did there? Well, sometimes one of the best skills you can have is knowing when to say no to your clients. It could be a very stressful situation having to do that, having to say no to your clients. It's scary. What are they going to do? How are they going to react? But sometimes the situation you find yourself in requires you to put your foot down and do just that, say no. Now, way back in episode 42 of Resourceful Designer, I discussed how it's okay to say no to graphic design work. And that one was a little bit different than what I'm talking about today. In that one, I talked mostly about how and why you should turn down certain design work, some projects, or perhaps some design clients, people you might not want to work with or projects you might not want to work on. In today's episode, I'm going to share 9 situations where you should say no to your clients, but this is mostly after you've already started working with a client. Now, if you're curious in episode 42, you can get to it by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 42 and have a listen. So let's get right into these 9 scenarios. Number 1, scope creep. It's the dreaded scope creep. You've already agreed to what the project entails. Hopefully, and I'm saying hopefully, via a signed contract. But even if you haven't, you've probably agreed to what this project you're working on with the client will involve. But for some reason, the client keeps trying to push things just a little bit further. You know, a little bit of scope creep, maybe that's okay. You can get away with just a little bit. I usually let clients push just a bit. It's almost expected on a project. But you'll know when enough is enough. And it's at that point that you just have to say no to your clients, no more. And that's at the point when you need to let them know that the scope of whatever it was that they're asking you to do, whatever the project was, they've now gone beyond what you initially discussed. And at this point, you can say that either you cannot accommodate, there are new demands that you just can't do it, or you need to renegotiate the terms of the project because you're going to have to charge them more. And a lot of clients will understand this. Clients will try to get whatever they can from you. But if you come back to them and say, no, this is what we agreed upon. If you want something else, either I'm not doing it or you're going to pay me more for it. Most clients will respect you for that when you say no. So don't be afraid to say no when you notice scope creep. Now, situation number 2 is when a project that you're working on is beyond your abilities, or when a client, this may be an existing client that comes to you and say, I've got a new project for you, and whatever they ask you to do is beyond your skill sets, you can say, no, sorry. I mean, there's no shame in showing your boundaries. In fact, the client may appreciate your honesty in letting them know that you're not able to do what they're asking. Now, if it's within your ability to take on the project and then farm it out to somebody else, or if you have contractors that work with you, then there's no reason to say no. But sometimes what's being asked of you is maybe beyond your comfort zone. Maybe it's not something you want to oversee. You just would prefer have nothing to do with it. Well, in those cases, just say no. There's nothing wrong with that. And your clients won't think any less of you. Now, the third situation where it's okay to say no to your clients, or you should be saying no to your clients, is if you have a client that you've had difficulties with maybe previous projects. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, some clients are difficult to work with. And if at some point you decide that, this client is just too much trouble, then the next time they bring a project to you, just say no. It's as simple as that. Remember that no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require you to explain anything. Simply saying something like, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to take on that project should be good enough. If the client asks you why, you don't have to give an explanation. You just say, well, I can't, I'm sorry, but I just can't. I've got too much, or I've just decided that I don't want to work on that project. And sometimes it's easier to cut ties with a difficult client. It'll make you feel better. It'll be less stressful. And in the long run, you'll be better off. So if you've had difficulties with previous projects with a client and they bring something new to you, it's okay to say no, you don't want to work on it. Now, the fourth situation I want to talk about is negotiations. Some clients like to haggle for the best deal. There's some people that it's in their nature. My mom was like that. Everywhere she went, she tried to get a deal. And it was almost like a challenge to her where she'd go and she'd try to get a better price for something. And you will have clients like this. I've had clients that I've dealt with for years. and they try every time to get a little deal out of me, even just a little bit. And my advice to you is nip this in the bud right away and say no to your clients. Tell them you don't negotiate. Now, that might not stop them. As I said, I've got one client that I know that every single time they ask me if I can do better, and I tell them, no, these are my rates. And we've been doing this for years, but it doesn't stop them from asking, and it doesn't stop me from saying no. So if they want to negotiate with you, there's no reason. You've set your rates. You have a price. There's no other industry out there that will cave to this sort of thing. If you go to a restaurant for a meal, you can't tell the restaurant oh, I'd really like this meal, but I think the price is a little high. How about bringing it down to this for me? They're not going to do that for you. If you go into a shopping mall or a Walmart or something and you want to buy something, you can't go to the cash and say, oh, I really like this thing, but can you give me a better deal on it? No, they're not going to do it. And you should run your business the same way. If somebody wants to negotiate with you, say no. Now, of course, there are some situations where negotiations may be required, but in some cases, that might be discussing the overall scope of the job. You want to bring the price down? Sure. Then let's reduce the scope of what work needs to be done. What part of the project can we eliminate in order to bring the costs down? That sort of negotiations are acceptable. But just, oh, well, you're going to charge me $300 for that job. Would you do it for $250? No, that sort of things, just say no. Now, the fifth scenario where you should say no to your clients is whenever there's going to be micromanaging involved, or in other words, too many cooks in the kitchen. Some clients, just by nature or just the way the business is run, have to decide everything by committee. There's a board of directors, there's a whole bunch of people involved. Whatever it is, they like to have, or everybody likes to have a say in the situation. And you know what? That's their prerogative. If they want to run their business that way, then good for them. However, you can demand to have only one point person that you deal with. Let them discuss all they want and then to have that one person come to you. And that way, should anyone else from the company, from the board, from the committee, whatever, contact you about that project that you're working on, technically you're working on it for them. But if they contact you, somebody else other than that point person, then you can tell them, no, sorry, I don't deal with you. If you want this, you have to go through so-and-so. And then if it's viable, that way I'll know that this is legit. And a lot of people, some people will get upset at this, especially if they're higher up. It's like, well, I'm the president of the company. Well, you know what? I've told presidents of companies before that, no, we agreed at the beginning that your secretary will be the point person. So if you have something to tell me, bring it through the secretary. If it doesn't come through her, I don't bother with it. And I mean, some of them have been taken aback because they're the president. But if you say this is what we agreed upon, they will have to honor it. And, in most cases, even the ones that were kind of hurt or upset or insulted whenever this happens, after a while, they realize that there was a reason, a good reason for it. And they saw the merit in having that chain involved with everything goes through one person. So having one point person on a project, so saying no to people micromanaging you, will save you a lot of time for one thing and a lot of headaches. So never deal with a committee or an entire board or that. You can present to them, but any correspondence should all come through one point person. So say no to the quote unquote, too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, the sixth scenario where you should say no to your clients is if they come to you with an impossible timeline. Sometimes it's just not possible to do what your clients want in the time frame that they want it in. Maybe you're simply overloaded with work. And if that's the case, good for you. Congratulations. Or maybe you're getting ready to go on vacation and you only have a couple of days left to wrap everything up before you go. And the client comes to you with something last minute. Well, there are times where you just can't do it. And whatever the case, if you can't do something in the time frame required, it's your job, your obligation to say right away, no, I can't do that. Now, this happened to me just last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. Last week, I was away. I went to a podcasting conference in Philadelphia, and I had sent out a message to my clients, all clients that I had active projects going. I didn't send it out to every client, but the ones I had active projects on. I sent them out an email saying, listen, I'm going away and my office will be closed from such and such a date to such and such a date. And that was fine. Well, one client that I hadn't sent anything to, they heard somehow, I don't know how they heard, that I was going to be going away. So they contacted me Thursday morning, mid-morning, to ask me if I can design a brochure for them before I left on Friday, before I closed my office at the end of the workday on Friday. And I told them, I says, I can't. And they were begging me. They were willing to pay a rush fee extra and all that. And this is a good client. I've done lots of stuff with them before. Great client to work with. But they were going on and on. It's like, come on, Mark, you've never failed us before, and trying to guilt me into this. And I just held my ground. And I says, no, I've got a day and a half at this point, or a day and almost 2 days, but when they contacted me. And I told them, I says, I still have other things for other clients to complete. I have some other stuff to take care of. I don't have the time to do this. And I had to put my foot down and say, no, it can't be done. And eventually the client had to live with that. And they backed down. And it was a case, if you remember back in episode 71 of the podcast titled Good Design, Quick Design, Cheap Design, Pick 2. That was a case in that podcast. I talked about how you could only have two. If you want good design and quick design, it's not going to be cheap. If you want good design and cheap design, it's not going to be quick. And if you want quick design and cheap design, it's not necessarily going to be good. Well, this was a case where I couldn't pick two. And that's why I had to say no. They wanted it quick and they were willing to pay a premium price, but I would have had to do it too quick that I know it wouldn't have been good design. And I just didn't want to do that. So I told them no, and I didn't do it. Now, the funny situation is I got back to work this week, and not on Monday, but on Tuesday, that client actually called me and asked me if now I have time to work on their brochure. And I said, sure, I can add it on and I'll start working on it next week, because now I'm playing a little bit of catch up with the stuff that was away. Says I can start working on it next week. And they're fine with it. So I have no idea what the pressure was beforehand to get this done before I left on holidays. But now it's all of a sudden, there's no big rush. It's Mark's back from holidays. Let's get this project done. And they're giving me the time to work on it, the time that this project needs. So sometimes clients are weird that way. They hear that you're going away or your office is going to be closed for whatever reason, and they panic and they need these things. Well, if it's an impossible timeline, just say no. You don't want to do it. You can't do it. It's not possible. And the client's going to have to live with that decision. Now, the seventh situation is a little bit different. In this one, it's when a project is not worth your time. This is for, all those jobs that you simply don't want to do. They're boring. They're tedious. There's really no creativity in them. And that there's just nothing in it for you. So why would you want to do it? Unless you're in a situation where you really, really need the money, you're better off to say no to these projects and work on something that would be more beneficial to you. From time to time, I'll get clients that'll ask me to design something like an invoice or a packing slip. Now, I used to do those when I worked at the print shop because that was the nature of the print shop, that we would design those things and then have them printed. But nowadays, I'm not that sort of designer anymore. It's a boring job, it's tedious, and I just don't want to do that sort of thing. Not to mention that at the rates I'm charging for my design services, why would they want to pay me to put horizontal and vertical lines on a piece of paper just so that they can send out an invoice or a packing slip? There's people out there can do this for a much lower price than I can, or that I will. I shouldn't say that I can, but that I will. Even going to a print shop, if you're going to have these things printed somewhere, go to the print shop and have them design it. So if it's a project that's not worth your time, just say no. You don't have to take on every little thing. Unless you're in a situation where money is dire and you really need it, just say no to those projects. Now, the eighth situation that I want to share with you is when there's bad design choices involved. Sometimes a client will ask you for something in their design, and you just think that's a bad idea. And if it's a bad idea, it's I almost want to say it's your duty as a professional designer to say no, that you won't do it. Maybe it's a case of a client seeing all the beautiful white space you left in a design, and they want to fill all that white space up with copy because, oh, that real estate is valuable. Let's put as much messages on there as we can, or as many messages on there as we can. Well, that's a situation where you can say, no, that really ruins the design. You don't need all those messages. Or it could be as simple as a client saying, you know, the old joke, can you make the logo bigger? Well, maybe you can tell the client, no. I can make the logo bigger, but I won't make the logo bigger because it doesn't need to be bigger. It works well with the flow of the design. Whatever it is, just let the client know that what they're asking will affect their designs negatively. And if it affects the designs negatively, it'll affect their business, their organization, whatever it is you're designing. It'll have a negative impact on that. And even if they insist, you can still say no, you won't do it. Stick to your morals. And you know what? It's amazing when you actually take this sort of stand, when you tell a client that, no, I won't do that. That's bad design. When all of a sudden, the client will take you more seriously. They'll see you more as the professional, and they'll appreciate the skills and what you have to offer because you didn't just do what they asked you to do. And in some places, some clients, they're used to bossing people around. They're used to having people just do whatever they ask. And when somebody says no to them, they really take notice, and some of them will really respect you for it. So don't be afraid to say, no, I won't do that because it's bad design choice. Now, I wish I could have told my younger self this bit of advice because I think I shared this on an old episode of the podcast, but if not, when I was working at the print shop, I was designing a logo for a local carpenter. He was designing cabinets. Anyways, he was a woodworker. And I can't remember what his business name was, but he asked me to design a logo for him. And I designed what I thought was a beautiful logo. I was still fairly new designer back then. So looking back or thinking back, I don't actually have a copy of it, but thinking back, it might not have been the best logo, but it was still a well-designed logo. And he came back to me and he says, I like that, but I have another idea. Can you try something for me? And of course, being young and naive, I decided to listen to what he had to say. And he wanted his logo to look like it was a piece of wood with the name of his company written in the same font that Star Trek The Next Generation is written in, because he is a huge Star Trek fan. And I should have right there said, no, it doesn't suit the style of business. You've shown me photos of your work. You're designing these beautiful cabinets. What does the Star Trek font have to do with this? The only reason he wanted that is because he was a lifelong Star Trek fan. So me being young and thinking the clients knows best, I designed this thing. It was like a wooden plaque that I hand drew, and I'm not an illustrator, but I drew a board in pen and ink, and I hand drew what looked like waves in the wood and knots and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was not very good. I honest, it wasn't very good. But again, I was young and I was following what the client wanted. I managed to find online a Star Trek font or something that was close to it. And it was on one of those free font databases. And this is back in the 90s. So, the fonts were kind of iffy back then. And I typed out his name and I showed it to him, and the client loved it. I thought it was the most hideous thing ever. And the client loved it. But before he wanted it to be done, he says, can you add one more thing to the logo? Can you make it look like there's a fish jumping over the logo, coming from behind and jumping in front? And I asked him, what does this have to do with your business? You're a carpenter. And his response was, oh, this past weekend, I took my young son, and I forget how old his son was, like 8 or 9 years old. I took my young son out fishing for the very first time, and he absolutely loved it. And ever since then, he keeps asking, when are we going fishing? When are we going fishing? When are we going fishing? So since my son loves fishing so much, I thought it would be neat to have a fish in my logo. Yep, you heard that right. The client wanted to add a fish to his carpentry logo because his young 8, 9-year-old son had gone fishing for the very first time and had enjoyed it. And the father thought, oh, well, that's a great idea. I'll add a fish to my logo. Now, if anybody knows 8 or 9-year-old kids, by the following week, I'm sure he wasn't thinking about fishing at all. It's whatever the next thing happened to be around that he liked. And that was it. For all I know, they never went fishing again. But being young and naive, I just said yes, and I added a fish to the logo. What ended up being the worst logo I'd ever designed became even more so because of the fish. And to top it all off, a couple of weeks after I designed this, I saw a white van driving around town with this logo plastered on the side of it. And I was so ashamed that that was something I had done. And I was hoping that this guy wasn't going around saying, oh yeah, this logo, Mark Decote designed that for me. I was hoping he wasn't saying that. I don't know if he did or not, but man, and that's the case where bad design choices. Nowadays, if anybody came to me with that, I would just say no. There's no way I'd do that. And I wish my younger self would have known that, because that's something I have to live with, that's a logo I actually designed as a professional designer. And it was probably one of the most hideous things you've ever seen. But I just followed what the client asked, and I didn't have the gumption to say no to him. So bad design choices. And the final scenario, the ninth one that I want to share with you, is a little bit similar to bad design choices. And that's just when a client asks you to do something that really compromises your design principles. Not just that it's bad, but there's something that you really shouldn't be doing as a designer. Maybe it's something as simple as them wanting to, use a script font or one of those old English type fonts, but in all caps, something a designer should never do. Or maybe they want you to design a poster or a brochure and they want you to use 10, 12 different fonts on it, which will make it look horrible. Or perhaps it's just something as innocent as asking you to put a hit counter at the bottom of a new website. Don't laugh. I had a client just a couple of months ago ask me to do this. And these are all things you have to say no to. No, because it'll compromise your design principles. If anybody sees this, it'll reflect badly on you. I mean, it's just as bad as somebody coming up to you and saying, can you design my logo? And I want you to use Comic Sans. Whatever it is that they ask you to do, if you think that anybody else that sees this will think less of you as a designer, or if some of your design peers saw it, would they think less of you? Or would the industry, will it affect the industry in a negative way? Then it is your duty to say no to your clients, that you will not do that because it compromises your design principles. So there you have it, 9 situations where you should say no to your clients. Now, I would love to know what other situations there are. I just came up with these 9 while I was contemplating this topic for today's episode, but I'm sure there's many more situations, and I would love to hear what you think. What sort of situations do you know of where you should be saying no to your clients? Please visit the website and leave a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 129. I would love to know what situations you think you should say no to your clients. And now, this week's question of the week. This week's question was posted in the Resourceful Designer Facebook group, and it was posted by Amanda. And she asked, when a client's corporate font is one that they've purchased, can they send you the font file? Or does the designer need to purchase the font in order to use it to design their projects? So thanks for posting that in the group, Amanda. And you've got a few answers in the Facebook group there. But I just want to give you my take on this. In most situations, depending on the license, first of all, you got to look at the license of where the font was purchased from. In most situations, the license will allow distribution of the font specifically for this purpose. If you have to send it to a printer, it allows you to send the font to the printer. If you are using a designer, it allows you to send the font to the designer. So in most cases, if you look at the license, you are protected and the client can send you the font. Now, in the rare situations where they don't, or for some reason the license doesn't allow that, it's maybe some fonts, they're using a font, and maybe the font is not allowed for commercial use. If the font is not allowed for commercial use, then it's your duty to let them know that you can't use that font because of that. It's not a commercially viable font. And they actually would have to change the font that they're using if they're using it outside of the scope of what the license allows. But in most situations, you should be able to just get the font from them. Now, worst case, if for some reason it is a commercial font, but the license does not specify that they can pass it on to a printer or a third party that's doing work for them, and you need to purchase the font, then the client should be responsible for that cost. You would charge them, either they would pay for it and you would just get your own license, or you would buy it and charge them for it. And I've had this happen before where I have certain fonts on my computer that were purchased specifically for a client. And that's the only client I use those fonts on. I will not use those fonts on any other client because that license was purchased specifically for that client. That client paid for that license. Now, if it's a situation where you think you might want to use the font in the future, it's your prerogative. You can say, okay, well, I'm going to buy the font myself, depending on how much it is. You can say, I'll buy the font so that it's licensed to me and I could use it on your project, on whatever client. But since I have the font, it's licensed to me and it's a commercially usable font, I could then use it on other client projects as well. But it all does come down to the terms of the license. So make sure you read that. But most cases, I'd say 99% of the time, you shouldn't have any money to put out yourself. The client should be paying for that sort of thing. Unless, as I stated, that you want the font for yourself. And it all depends. If it's a $20, $30 font, then I will often buy it myself. That way I have it available to anybody else. If it's a font that costs a few $100s, no, I'll let the client pay for that. I'm not going to buy a font because I've got a lot of other fonts I could use instead. Now, one quick thing I do want to mention is if you are purchasing a font, look around, shop around. Recently, I had a situation where I needed to buy a specific font for a client. And this was a font that I had used. I had used the font myself to design a logo. And then the client decided they liked the font. They wanted to use it for some other stuff. And they were looking to purchase it. They didn't want me to give it to them. They asked to purchase where they can purchase. And the place that I had purchased it from didn't have that font anymore. It wasn't available on that platform. So I shopped around and I found prices ranging from, I think, $19 for the font up to $200 and some dollars. In some cases, this font had 3 variants. It had a light, a medium, and a bold. And I had only used the one. And in some places, you can buy each one individually, the light, the medium, and the bold, and you'd pay a separate price. But other foundries or places where you can buy fonts had the 3 of them for a package. And sometimes, like one place was charging, say, I'm just going to use a number off the top of my head. Some places were saying if you want the light, it was $30, the medium was $30, and the bold was $30. So you'd pay $90 for all 3 of them. But another place had a package where you'd get all 3 of them for $30. So just my recommendation is if you're going to buy a font, don't just automatically buy it from the first place or the site that you usually like, myfonts.com or wherever. Don't always buy it from that first place you find it. Do a search for the font and find out if anybody else has it at a better price, because oftentimes I have found one foundry charging more than double the price where somebody else has it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Amanda. You've had lots of other answers in the Facebook group. So I'm happy that you did post the question there. You got some good response, but I thought I'd pitch in my little thing here on the podcast. Now, if you would like to submit a question for the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question. It's been a while since I've had a question submitted. That's why I'm pulling them out of the Facebook group. And if you're not already a member of the Facebook group, you can join by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/group, and that'll redirect you there. You can ask to join. Please make sure you fill out or answer my 3 questions. If you don't answer them, I will not let you in. It doesn't matter what your profile says. If you're a designer, you're running your own business, you might be the perfect member for the group. If you don't answer those questions, I just decline your invitation. So that's it for the question of the week. Before I head off, I just want to thank, it's the beginning of the month when I'm recording this, and I just want to thank everybody that is supporting me on Patreon right now. Which are Envision App, Joshua from Dedicated Web Designs, Ali from Running SEO at runningseo.com, as well as Pamela, Chris, Curio Creative Agency, Peter, Yannick, Benjamin, Josh, Wayne, Lisa, Madupe, and Stacy. Thank you so much for your support. Regardless of your pledge level, I'm honored that you are giving back to Resourceful Designer and that you appreciate what it is I'm doing for you here. And if you're not already a patron of the show and you would like to become one, for as little as $1 a month, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Patreon and submit your pledge. So that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do hope you come back again next week for whatever topic I decide to cover. And in the meantime, there's a whole back catalog of the previous 128 episodes that you can listen to if you haven't done so already. But until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.